Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through purpose and passion. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you so much for joining the show today. We've got a really special guest with us today, Cassie Perkins. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to explain to the listeners out there what we'll do today. We're going to learn more about Cassie's occupation and her career, and then we're going to go through some long format questions, and then we'll wrap it up. If you guys got any questions out there, feel free to put them in the comments section, and we'll ask them at the end, as well as Cassie's supporting a nonprofit at the end of the show, so make sure you listen to that. Cassie, so what is your exact occupation and your job title?
So I am a business manager. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting and a master's in just a general MBA. And so I work in the music industry here in Nashville, the music and entertainment industry. And the firm that I have just committed to has some really, really great folks on their books of business. So they've got the Kardashians and just a lot of well-known like household names. So I kind of help them manage their money. And we help do their tax returns. We kind of handle everything from a financial standpoint for those individuals. And it's a super rewarding job, especially for somebody like me. I love the details of the numbers and the kind of black and white of accounting. But then I also love the entertainment industry, and it gives me an opportunity to kind of have both of those needs met. And I feel like I really get to help people because lots of times when you have these creatives, they have these beautiful ideas that change our world. But as we all know, as folks in business, you can't have a business without finances to do it. And so we kind of help make sure that they have the resources that they need from the profits that they generate so that they can keep making the world a better place.
Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. And then you're passionate on the side is the Miss America. Can you kind of explain that? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis or on a volunteer side?
Yeah, so I actually entered the Miss Tennessee pageant. So I'm here in Nashville, Tennessee, and I entered into the Miss Tennessee pageant on a whim. The director had reached out to me, and it was during tax season, and I thought, well, maybe this is a good opportunity for me to make sure that I'm still hitting the gym during a stressful time of my career whenever we all have a little bit less time in the accounting world. And so I entered and I won, and I was like, oh, holy cow, what am I going to do with this? And so the national philanthropy for the pageant is called the Victoria's Voice organization, and they specifically work in addiction rehabilitation and destigmatization. And so I was like, okay, this is like an answer that for a question that I had for a long time, because my dad had struggled with addiction for years, but I had been in recovery for about 5, and I was really at a place where I wanted to talk about it. And so whenever I went and competed in Las Vegas with 52 other women from around the country, I was able to share that story, and I've been able to share it throughout the year that I've been Miss for America. I'm the first, so we are a sister pageant of the Mrs. America organization, which has been around for over 50 years, and they just recently this year added an unmarried division, and so that's what I fit into. And I've just been able to advocate for other women that are unmarried and unattached, and encourage them to have a voice of their own. I've been able to advocate for folks in recovery, just like my dad, and I've been able to advocate for childhood literacy, which is my personal platform. So I'm partnered with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Her organization helps deliver books to students from young learners from the age of birth to 5th grade, or to the age of 5. And so those students get books sent to their home, and it encourages them to fall in love with reading and creates reading readiness before they ever go into the classroom. And then I'm also a published children's book author, so I've been able to share the message of my book, which is where there is a will, there is a way, and talk about the power of persistence, because that's really, I feel like, what's brought me to this place in my life.
You hit on a bunch of things, but one of the things coming out in my new book is I talk about diversifying your portfolio in your career. In other words, I encourage people to throw a lot out there, and whatever your talents and your skills are, is gravitate to those particular careers. I think you're a prime example of that. You have multiple jobs. Not only you have your full time, but you also have your passionate work that you're working on. And I don't think a lot of people know what kind of volunteer service the pageant does. Like you're helping all these different organizations, these nonprofit organizations, and I'm glad you explained that because I don't think like because I'm not into it, so I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But it sounds like the pageant itself raises a lot of money for nonprofit organizations. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does. And a lot of the funds that we raise go to the Victoria's Voice organization. So yeah, there is definitely a level of fundraising involved, but there's also just this opportunity that we have as state and national title holders to encourage folks to give of their time, which is really our most valuable resource. I come from very humble beginnings, and I know it's not always an option to give money, but I know that it's always an option for us to give our time. And so that's really what I focused on encouraging other folks to donate. It's just their time, their most valuable resource to a cause that they fall in love with.
That's awesome. And what did you dream about? If you go back to when you were growing up and you were in grade school, was there a career you dreamed about doing? And it doesn't have to be what you're doing now, it could be anything.
Yeah, well, so I grew up in a very small southern town where you very much as a female were told that you had one of two jobs that you could have. You could be a nurse or you could be a teacher. And my parents were teachers, and I knew that that wasn't the route that I wanted to go. And I was so squeamish that my mom would encourage me to like watch these operating shows because she felt like I needed to fit into one of those two molds, and that if I didn't want to be a teacher, I had to be a nurse. And so I had these dreams of being a nurse practitioner because I thought that was like the pinnacle of what I could be within the mold that the space I was in life told me I had to fit in. And then when I got to college and I took that first AMP class and I threw up when I had to dissect a cat, I was like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put my foot down. And so um, I was working at the time as an accounting assistant, just because, like I said, I come from humble beginnings, and I absolutely had a job, had to have a job when I was in college, and it was the best paying job I could find for the limited talent that I had as an 18-year-old kid. And I fell in love with numbers, and I realized that while I didn't really have a passion to do calculus, I had this vast passion to help folks in business be able to take the money that they're making and make that money make more money for them. And so, yeah, I pursued a degree in accounting and knew that I wasn't done there and that I wanted to go ahead and get a master's degree. And so I did, and worked in public accounting, which is a snooze fest. To all the people out there that love it, I commend you. I did my time. I worked in public for 3 years, and then I found something that really fit me. And I think this is the perfect career choice for me right now. I mean, I also have learned through 2020 that, we have to be open to change, and we have to be able to roll with the punches and go with where the new normal is going to take us. And so I'm never locked in to the point to where I say I can't make another career change. But I think for right now, this is definitely what I want to be doing.
Thank you for the story. That's awesome. I think a lot of people, when you hear an accountant, you assume that's boring line of work, and you said passion behind the numbers. So you obviously love what you're doing now. And you hit on another point. Just because you're happy now in a career doesn't mean your desires and your skill sets won't change in a couple of years. And that's really what we're seeing in the millennial workforce is that after 3 or 4 years, people tend to get either they want a new challenge or they grow unhappy in a certain field. And the key is you don't stay in that mindset. You work towards something else and you have an exit strategy. So I really enjoyed your story about that. Now, what skills do you think you need to possess? Obviously you're an accountant, but what kind of skills do you need to have to do that particular career?
Um, in business management,
Yes.
so I think that there is a place for like the great accountants of the world, the people that love to be in the numbers all the time. I don't think that business management, because it is a front facing or a client facing profession, is always for folks that just want that desk life. And I've met so many fantastic accountants that are so incredibly good at what they do, but they don't want to have to deal with a client. And they certainly don't want to have to explain very basic accounting principles to someone that you may have to explain it 3 or 4 times to them because while they can write music, that we're going to listen to you on the radio for years, they don't get accounting. And they don't have that drive and that passion behind it. So you have to have patience, and you have to have this desire to teach and to educate folks. And then you also have to want, um, for the people that you serve to be able to do the really great things that they're doing in the world, and you be able to like be on the back end and give them that like financial ground that they need to stand on to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do. I think lots of people have that, but having that passion, it's almost like sometimes I feel like I have the passion that they have for their work, because I know without any piece of the puzzle you can't bring it to fruition, but we're like that backbone, you know. And that's why I fell in love with accounting, is because it's like the first step to anything else that you can do, whether you own your own um, doctor's practice, or whether you own a talk show. I mean, you have to have that financial backing to be able to move forward in the right direction.
Can you think back to a time, during your career or as you were going through school? I often tell students and professionals that behind successful people, there's always adversity that's been in everybody's story. And whether that's, as I remember when I failed my first test in college, or, maybe even a deeper setback. Can you think back to a time when you were going through your career journey where you had a setback and you were able to overcome that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, like you said, I had been in public accounting for 3 years and just did not. I audited banks, and I just really loved the numbers but hated what I did. I have, and this is just my story, but I have a really small tattoo on my foot. I mean, really small, the size of a dime. And I remembered I walked into a bank and they told me that I had to cover it up. And I'm like, look, I am a great accountant and I don't need to cover up my tattoo. And for me, that was like, the last straw of, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. I will not fit your mold. And so I was frustrated with my career for a while, and then started looking for other options. And I found this unique niche in accounting where you can have tattoos from your neck down and people are going to welcome you in. And actually, your clients are probably going to think that you're cooler and want to hang out with you more. And so I think finding like having that mindset of, this is what I'm in right now, but it's not what I have to be in forever, was where I had to get to be able to be happy in my career. And just because I wasn't happy in like that sect of accounting didn't mean that I was never going to be happy in accounting. It just meant that where I was in that moment wasn't right for me. But I also know sometimes you get into things and you realize, hey, look, I just need to start over. I think just having the courage to like follow your heart, because it knows what's best. And there's no sense in doing something that's not going to make you happy for the rest of your life. There is no dollar amount that you can put on happiness.
You reinforced some things that I talked about when you said that you grew up in a small town and you were told you were either going to be a nurse, or what was the other, a teacher,
Nurse or a teacher.
a nurse or a teacher. And I think, even in big towns, and I grew up from a small town, that we're not exposed at a high school level or even a college level on how many different career pathways out there is. In fact, the Department of Labor and Bureau of Statistics says there's 821 career pathways in North America. And I would be hard pressed if you asked me coming out of high school or college, I could probably name 15. And I don't think we're taught that at an early level where we know different careers that we can go down. How did you find out accounting was something you wanted to major in once you got to college?
You know, I had tried a couple of different things just class wise, and it was just the only thing that, like, this is going to sound incredibly nerdy, so please take it just with a grain of salt. But I knew that I wanted to find something that made me have that like aha moment, or like that I fell in love with this moment, or like where I could do more of the same work and it didn't feel like work. And I never felt like that in any other class other than accounting. It was like it spoke to me and told me that that's what I wanted to do. And in that same breath, I knew that whenever I got a general MBA, that I wasn't only locked down to accounting, because our preferences can change, and what we fall in love with when we're 20 may not be what we want to do for the rest of our life. And I knew that that could be an option for me. And that's why I took that extra step to have more general knowledge in all of business. But yeah, it was just it was just this moment where I remember I was in accounting one and I finished my first balance sheet. It sounds so nerdy. And I was like, this is beautiful. Like I could see the beauty in the numbers that were on the page and like the story that they told. But I am a very slow reader. I love to read and I love to write, but I knew that I would never be proficient at that on a level where I could work in storytelling. To the same capacity that you do. And so that was the other way for me to tell stories was through numbers.
So awesome. Me and my college roommate took to our accounting class together because it was required in business. We both majored in business. And I remember the first lesson, I think I was half asleep. And he was after the class, he was like, "This is something I think I want to major in." I was like, "Mark, you've been to one class, dude. They're like, how do you know this is something you want to major in?" And I think I knew right away because I really struggled with numbers and math my whole life. I knew right away that's not a path for me. Um, but I think you said something. You went to that first class, you enjoyed it. And I think that's a lot of things what we need to do as professionals and students. We need to get exposure to certain things. We need to get exposure to, I even talk about taking classes as an inactive participant where you
Yeah.
actually join the class. And if you think economics is a way forward, if you take the first class of economics, you're probably going to know whether you want to continue down that route or not. So,
Mhm.
great analogy of the accounting phase. Let's talk about your nonprofit work you do.
Yeah.
I think it's so impressive. I think we share that passion. I really enjoy the nonprofits I've worked with. Tell me more about them. How can people get involved? Why should they get involved? You kind of talked about the time aspect, but let's touch on that again and explain some of the good things they're doing out there.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my partnerships, my personal partnerships first. So I work with an organization called Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. And it's just super easy to get involved. You would just go to Dolly Parton's imaginationlibrary.com and she has a map of the US. You click on the state that you live in, and if you have a child that's between the age of birth and 5, you put in your information and you can get a book sent directly to your home. And so there's a couple ways in which the Imagination Library is funded. So one half of that funding comes from the Dolly Parton Foundation, and then the other half is left up to the communities that it serves. So for like us here in Tennessee, that's made up of 2 organizations: the Governor's Books for Birth program. So it's funded directly by our governor's office, and then the other half is left up to the small communities. So here in Nashville, that's the United Way. I've worked with organizations in East Tennessee that raise funds in other ways. And so after you get your child signed up, then take that next step to find out what's funding that organization. Or if you're an educator and you know someone that could really benefit from the Imagination Library, help get them signed up. Take that first step to like get the resources to figure out how great it is, and then ask how you can donate of your time or your money or whatever resource it is to be able to continue that program into the future. So that's the work I do kind of here in the US. And then internationally, I've been able to work with an organization called Books for Africa. The Imagination Library is also an international organization, but they specifically serve Canada, Australia, and the UK. And so I felt that there was a need for educational materials in Africa. And so I've worked with an organization called Books for Africa. I did a trip there back in 2015, and it sounds like I'm about to be heading back to Africa to deliver some more books to students and young learners in Kenya. So that's been really great. So Books for Africa is actually located in Atlanta, so it's close to you. And you can log on to their website and see how you can get involved. But mostly, you can just donate books that you don't want anymore to them, and then they will distribute them to folks in Africa that need them. And then I've done work with Victoria's Voice organization, which works to destigmatize addiction, and I've spoken at probably 50 addiction recovery centers throughout the state this year, or throughout the nation this year, and just tried to destigmatize addiction. So my dad was in active addiction for 20 years, and that so painted like the whole way that my family was seen. And then as an adult, like there were so many things that I had missed out on throughout my childhood because my dad was in active addiction, and I always felt like I had to kind of fill in these gaps in my childhood when I told my story with other things. But through this pageant, I've been able to just bravely tell my story. And so I just hosted an a non a fundraising organization to bring in funds for the Victoria's Voice program. And we hiked 12 miles in representation of the 12 steps of recovery. We raised about $3,000 for Victoria's Voice, and we did a virtual hike. So people from all over the US hiked. But there was a moment when I got to look down at my dad at our pre hike event and just say, thank you. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for choosing your family. So that was really cool. And then I also visit, just as Miss for America, I visit homeless shelters, I visit family shelters, libraries, and I read and give this message of this children's book that I wrote, which is where there is a will, there is a way. And that's the story my mom told me when I was little, of just perseverance, of just sticking with it even whenever it's hard.
Impressive, just so impressive. I'm so proud of you, where you've come and where you began from, growing up in a rural town and then graduating with your master's, and the ways that you're submitting your legacy right now. It's really powerful, what you're doing. So if you're out there and you want to help in these nonprofit organizations, I'm going to link to this video. Let's move to the questions that the students had. So we did have a few that came in overnight, and then we'll close it out. So thank you so much, Cassie. So one of the questions from the students is they're interested in the pageant work. It looks like this particular student wants to follow a summer route in the pageants. How do they get started? What should they know? Is it a full-time endeavor? And what's the time commitment? Looks like several questions from one student.
So, it depends on what state you're in. It depends on what pageant system you want to do. It depends on what you want to get out of that pageant. So whenever I was in undergrad, I did some pageants in as well, but I specifically, my thought process was, how can I make this work to my benefit? So as a college student, I was like, okay, I want to go on the study abroad trip. I need to generate $5,000 quickly. How am I going to do it? And I just Googled how to make $5,000 in the state of Tennessee. And these pageants started coming up, and I was like, whoa, I can make money off of pageants. Like I can use that to as a scholarship to pay for this trip. And so if you want to get funding out of it, then you're going to look for a different type of pageant. If you are just looking to kind of empower other women around you and yourself and advocate for things that are important to you, then there's another pageant for that too. So it depends on, first of all, what you want to get out of it, just like anything else in life. Like, why do you want to pick this career? Why do you want to live in this city? You should always ask, like, how is this going to further me in the mission and goal that I have? And then time commitment wise, it kind of depends on how well you want to do. Have you ever done a pageant before? If you haven't, your time commitment is going to need to be bigger than the time commitment from someone that maybe has been in pageants since they were little. Not to say that toddlers and tiaras are like toddlers that have been in pageants are in any way connected to what I do now. I'd never done one until I was 20, and I just did it then because I needed some funding to go on a trip. But yeah, so it just totally depends on what you want to get out of it. And I actually do have a consulting organization that I just started. And so if the student wants to reach out to me, she can do so through my website. It's cassieperkins.com. And so I'm hoping that I can kind of share some of the knowledge that I've gained over the years with other folks that want to get involved. But it is just such a personal, like individual thing. It's hard to say overall what the best route is.
Yeah, and we'll link to your site too, as far as we'll make sure that student gets that answer. And then the next question is, what after you done the pageants, do you keep working your way up to different ones? So I guess it comes back to your goal, like you said, what's your goal at the end of the day? But do you keep getting into where it's eventually Miss Universe, or does it work like that, or is there a process to it, or you kind of decide that?
Yeah. So we as the folks that are in the pageant don't make that decision. You make that decision on the front end. So you would either be in a pageant that went to a Miss Universe, a Miss International level, or you would be in a pageant that did not go further. And so for me, my pageant stopped at Miss for America. There is no pageant that goes on after this. This is kind of the pinnacle of where I could get to, and this is it. Now, in 2014, when I was in college, I did a pageant called Miss International, and I placed top 10 there. But that one did go on to an international title. So it just depends. You have to do your research and figure out what the pageant system that you're getting into leads to next. So some of them do have international titles. Most all of them have a national title, but not all of them go on to an international title.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been very inspirational. I can say for sure, coming from a small town, don't let the size of your town limit the size of your dreams.
Yeah,
And you've definitely done that. And so thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story.
yeah, I appreciate that. And then one thing really quickly to all the other kids out there that are in small towns, like you are going to get a benefit from growing up the way that you did and then wanting to get out of that folks that have always been exposed to more than you don't have. So know that maybe right now in this moment, or if you're in college like I was thinking, holy cow, what have I walked into? I don't fit in here. Just remind yourself that you're going to grow so much over the next little bit of time, and that you're always going to have that firm foundation of the roots in which you came from. And it is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you different, and you own your own story.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Cassie, and thanks for that motivating message. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you